Aloha and welcome to Island Connections. I'm Ibrahim Aoude. Civil liberties and the law. We're going to be discussing this topic with our guests. Eric Gill, Financial Secretary Treasurer of Local 5. Thank you for coming over. And Katie Reardon from Drug Policy Forum. Thank you. And you are the Executive Director of the Drug Policy Forum. And Jeanne Ohta is the Executive Director of the Drug Policy Forum. Katie Reardon, Director of Public Affairs and Governmental Relations, Planned Parenthood Hawaii. Thank you. I'm sorry about the mistake. And Laurie Temple, Staff Attorney, ACLU Hawaii Chapter. And I want to make a disclosure. I'm also on the board of the ACLU Hawaii chapter also. So just want to get this going for now. So what I would like of you to say something about your particular organization and what you are doing and would you like to do in the future, and what are some of the stuff that you are involved in. Okay, so we'll start with Jeanne.
The Drug Policy Forum seeks to get our drug policies focused on the public health approach rather than the current criminal justice approach. So we're hoping that drug usage is taken out of the criminal justice system.
Right. Okay, and Katie, what Planned Parenthood does?
So Planned Parenthood is a sexual and reproductive health organization, and we do a lot of things. We provide basic preventative sexual and reproductive health care for women and men. We provide sexual health education for teenagers, parents, teachers, and then we also do a lot of advocacy to try and make sure that all people have access to their reproductive rights.
Good. And Eric, could you tell us something about your organization?
Sure. We are a labor union. We're an international labor union. We have local unions around the United States and Canada and here in Hawaii. Local 5 is our local organization, and we advocate for the interests of our members. And we see our mission much broader. We advocate for working people in general. So we get involved in many different things.
Right. And Laurie, from the ACLU, what is the organization all about, and what do you do in the organization? And then we can go and figure out what's the relationship between all 5 of us, actually.
The American Civil Liberties Union of Hawaii has been around in Hawaii for 45 years, defending Hawaii citizens' right to be protected by the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, both the United States and Hawaii. We do this through litigation, as well as our legislative and our public education programs. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan. We don't take any government funds, and we look forward to another year of protecting people's civil rights.
Yeah, good. So what's the relationship like? We're all 5 on the program, so what's the relationship? Anyone could begin in terms of ACLU, civil liberties? What's the relationship between all of us here from your perspective? Anyone?
We're all here because we all have a stake in protecting the Bill of Rights and our constitutions, and whether that's through protecting reproductive health rights, protecting collective bargaining, reforming drug policy, or the range of activities that we look at the ACLU, we're all here for the same reason, and that's to defend civil liberties.
So some of the issues that you've been involved in, like maybe this year, especially now there's a legislative session ongoing, etc. Jeanne, would you like to say something about that?
Some of the issues that we've been working on are specifically is to I guess we would say to rethink our laws on marijuana. One of the first ways to do that is to think about decriminalizing the possession of small amounts of marijuana. And the reason this links up with civil liberties is because the arrests of minorities far outweighs other groups, so when we look at how our laws actually work on disproportionately criminalizing certain groups of people, then civil liberties come into play there.
Yeah, good. And Katie, how is that related to?
Well, when we talk about protecting people's reproductive rights, we're talking about their fundamental ability to control their lives and their bodies, and that's absolutely a civil liberty. And some of the things that we've all worked on together this year are the shackling ban that just passed third reading in the Senate today, which would prohibit the use of shackles and handcuffs on pregnant inmates during transport and labor and delivery and postpartum. Which, you know, not only is a huge indignity to women and their reproductive health, but also is a constitutional violation of their Eighth Amendment protections against cruel and unusual punishment.
And also we should say that there's a lot of women in prison because of drug problems. They've been arrested because they were in possession of drugs. There's also been a big push to criminalize women who are pregnant and use drugs. So that's where all of these issues are tied together with our various organizations.
Yeah, good. And Eric, a while back you had like civil disobedience action and so forth, and there's a relationship to
our work is intimately connected with freedom of speech and constitutional rights. We did, as you say, have our second major civil disobedience action here this past summer, it was in this past summer at the Hyatt, and this was, it's a conscious, civil disobedience is not disrespect for the law, and quite the opposite. Civil disobedience means I know the law, I understand what's going to happen to me, I'm going to do this to make a point, to make a free speech point. So in other words, we voluntarily took an arrest and to make a point, to make our point about that particular employer, the Wall Street bank that owns that place, that's driving it, you know, the fact that the banks in this country have made out in this economic crisis while attempting to cut workers. We also recently had a one-day lockout on Kauai, which was related to freedom of speech. Our members had been sent home by management for wearing buttons, basically expressing their points of view. And our members, you know, some of our leaders had been sent home a few months ago, and our members decided to back them up. So everybody went to work with the buttons on, and everybody got sent home. So in essence, we had a one-day lockout, and needless to say, the company changed its tune a little bit when workers stuck together and did it all at once. So we are, these are a couple examples. We fight for freedom of speech every day on the job. And I would point out that, you know, of the various discriminations, union activity is one that is very commonly penalized by employers. Whenever they can get away with it, they fire people who are trying to bring the union in, or when in a union setting, they often try to find ways to go after the leaders. So we have a very, very direct stake in civil liberties.
Yeah. And Laurie, I know that you are very active at the legislature, so could you give us an idea of what is going on with the ACLU, and what are the issues that you are like really watching and following?
Well, we had a great victory this year with the passage of the Civil Unions Bill that would establish a civil union system whereby same-sex couples could receive the same rights, responsibilities that the state gives to opposite-sex married couples. So that was a huge victory for us. And since we were able to pass it legislatively, we were able to dismiss our lawsuit that also asked for civil union benefits and responsibilities. So that was a good example of a kind of a three-pronged attack by the ACLU. Not just community organizing, which we've been doing for the past few years, but also working on getting the law passed legislatively, while at the same time filing a civil lawsuit to try to get the same benefits. So this was a great victory for us, and we'll look forward to learning that lesson and applying those lessons to future bills. We're also fortunate to have just passed through the House and the Senate the anti-shackling bill that Katie mentioned, that would ban shackling of pregnant inmates. That still has to go to conference committee and get the governor's signature, but that's a huge victory as well. We are also able to get an extension for the media shield, which is a bill that would protect journalists from having to reveal their sources in a court court procedure. So that bill again has to get past the governor, but we don't expect any challenge there.
Good. Anything else?
We have all kinds. In addition to that, we've got a bill that we're working on with Jeanne's group that would establish a medical marijuana dispensary. That bill's been significantly limited since it was first introduced, which has been a bit of a disappointment. But at the same time, we're encouraged that the legislature is at least taking a look at the program and making some serious consideration of it.
Because my other question was going to be how ACLU work is related to yours. So Jeanne, could you tell us something about that bill that you're working with the ACLU on?
Yes, the dispensary bills for medical marijuana patients. Now, we've had this law since 2000 that allows patients to use medical marijuana, but there's no provision in the current program that allows them to go and buy it. So once they get their card, their blue card, I get calls from patients all the time. Now what do I do? Where do I get my marijuana? And the plain truth is there's no real way to get it. And I have to tell them, well, you can use the illegal market. Now, the law allows them to grow it, but it says nothing about where to get the seeds or the starter plants, where they are to get dried product if they say have to go to chemotherapy next week and they can't grow it. So that's what this dispensary program is designed to provide, is safe access for patients, legal access.
Great. And Katie, any example of how you work with the ACLU, or you're working, or you've worked, or you would like to?
Well, we've worked together on a whole lot of different issues. The shackling ban, which I just brought up, one of our other priorities this year was a bill that unfortunately wasn't passed, but it was a bill that required hospitals who see sexual assault survivors in their emergency rooms immediately after an assault to give access to emergency contraception so that survivors can avoid pregnancy, but also get the standard of care that's been established by the American Medical Association, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, and we really see it as a fundamental right for victims to get, good basic health care.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, always was wondering in terms of Planned Parenthood, in terms of have you outreach programs? What kind of outreach programs? How many people you deal with on a average on a daily basis? It's those kinds of things I think are important for our viewers to know about.
Yeah, we do outreach in many different ways. Obviously, we have patients, and we try and provide as much information and access to the other programs that we do in our healthcare centers, so that it's really important that the patients that receive our care are also people who are invested in it and can become advocates for what we do and the kind of care that they receive. We do a lot of outreach at health fairs, a lot of education of parents and teachers and kids as well. And then we have a kind of loose organization of supporters that we can call on when we need help either on the state level or on the national level, or if there's issues that are affecting us in Hawaii. Recently, actually as close to as an hour ago, the federal government was in a negotiation to either shut down government operations and what people termed as to defund Planned Parenthood. And that was a situation where we were really able to call on all of our supporters, and thankfully our congressional delegation was supportive of us, but to make sure that they felt thanked. So we sent over 100 postcards to each one of our delegation members, and we've had phone calls and petitions going of our supporters here in Hawaii over to DC to say, please don't cut women's health care in Hawaii. This is what it means to us, and that's been very helpful.
Yeah, great. And Eric, in terms of outreach, I know you go to try to organize the unorganized, and you have, you still have some programs or some projects in doing so. Like I know about the airport workers. So is that still going on? Or?
Yeah, we're currently involved in 3 different organizing efforts. the airport food service workers are part of our jurisdiction nationally, and this is an attempt to bring Honolulu airport workers up to a national standard we have built over the years with the various airport concessionaires. So that is going well, and we expect to achieve recognition there sometime soon. A bunch of different things that will make a difference on the day. We also are embarking on organizing that portion of the former Ilikai, which is now the Marriott edition. So we're working on that, and we have a third, what we call a residual unit, a non-union group within our Kaiser. We represent the Kaiser workers, and this is a group within that is non-union that we are reaching out to and have been working on. So we're doing all that in order to, to bring the benefits of organization to those workers. In regards to other things we've done, we have been helpful in providing organization to the community people who are organizing around the civil unions bill. And, so we have provided some very practical support, organizational support, logistical support, and to the extent we can, trying to, provide some leadership to that. Our view on this is simple. It's not a question of numbers in this case. If I were to take a poll of our members, I doubt that the majority would necessarily, if you ask them the same question, do you support gay marriage? I don't know what the number is because we've never done that poll, but I suspect a large number would say, well, I don't think so. But that's not how we put it. When we organize around this, we organize around the reality of what it means. If we take a position as a union that there is this group of workers and then this group, in other words, we're gonna respect the rights of all these guys, but not these guys. Not only is that wrong on the face of it, but it undermines our strength and our power and our ability to defend everyone. If any one of our members feels that they're out, then every one of our members has to fear that. And how do you build unity when people have reason to believe that the union might throw somebody off the bus? So we don't see it purely as a civil liberties issue, although it is. We see it as an issue of how do you build unity among workers, which is the only path to actual economic and political power for working people. Individual workers have little resources. We work a lot. We have families. People work. They don't have a chance to go down and testify. So we together we can pool our resources, and that's what a union is a pooled resource of workers chipping in to support an organization that can advocate effectively for them. And that's so we see all of this as tied together. If we don't stand up for each and every member, then we can't convince any member that we're for real about that. And so I think that also works for the society as a whole. If our society basically carves out people and says, well, you guys don't get this set of rights, then we're doing the same thing as a society. We're carving people out, we're creating divisions, we're undermining people's unity and undermining the sense of community that should bring us all together in our common interest. Any community needs that. And I think what you've seen here is you see many people now advocating to split and divide and hate and to do that sort of thing, and it's breaking our community down.
Yeah, that's good because as you were talking about not leaving anyone out of the equation, I was reflecting on the ACLU and the question of like immigrant or migrant workers that the ACLU has defended, like on Maui, etc. Would you care to talk more about that, just to give us an idea? Like no one should be left out because an injury to one is an injury to all, which is actually like a union slogan.
Well, for most of us, we have the ability to speak, and for some of us, really loudly. But for immigrant communities, and particularly those who are illegal, who are here illegally, they don't have the voice to defend themselves. And so the ACLU feels that this is a priority, and particularly on Maui and the Big Island, where there are significant Latino communities. While we may consider ourselves a very diverse state, there are populations within the state that are targeted by law enforcement, and the Latino community on Maui and on the Big Island is especially targeted by the law enforcement. And so what we've been doing for the past couple years is trying to identify those communities through their community organizations and their community leaders, and try to get them the information that they need to protect themselves and protect their rights against law enforcement abuse. This involves community meetings as well as public education materials. So we've developed some Know Your Rights materials around this issue. Know your rights when you're encountering law enforcement. Know what to do when an ICE official, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement agent, comes to your door and asks to come in. What kind of documents do you have to provide or not, or what do you not have to provide? We've been able to get interpreters to donate their time to interpret these materials so that we can ensure that the populations themselves are able to understand it and use it effectively in their everyday lives. We've also been doing some work against some checkpoints that are, while on their face may look like alcohol checkpoints, are really just racially profiling to try to check for IDs for those populations. So we're looking to continue to get information about what's going on with the Latino communities, and so we've been trying to get the word out as much as possible and encouraging people to contact us if they have complaints or if they just want to share their stories, so that we can start building something that we can work from. And whether it would be to change those abuses through legislation or through litigation, or just if it's a public education effort, which would be the best solution. That's what we'd like to aim for.
Yeah, because as you're talking, I'm saying, like, you're not working against law enforcement, but actually in defense of the Constitution and reminding law enforcement about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all that. So it's interesting that they violate their own Constitution.
There is an element to that. So, I mean, first of all, our union has a very firm stand on immigration rights, and we have it bargained it into our contracts. To the extent that we have been able to work within the law, we've bargained provisions that, so Social Security no-match letters are not an automatic fire. We've done the best we can bargaining it. But in a larger sense, law enforcement in this situation is an instrument of the corporations. An attack on immigrant is an attack on workers. This is a subclass of workers, and the history of immigration policy in this country is when you need workers, you bring them in. When they start organizing and start actually trying to get rights and a decent standard of living, they push them out. And immigrant workers are used as a bonus for corporations. And you can see that in some of these ICE raids. There's very corporations that actually go down to Southern California and recruit people. Then, when they're done with them, they call the ICE people or the cops, and they come in and they scrape them out of there and they send them home. And that's the history in Hawaii as well, right? I mean, Hawaii's people all came from somewhere else, except for the Hawaiians, who actually did come from somewhere else at some point. But we've all been immigrants, and the history of the labor movement in Hawaii has been a history of immigrant workers organizing and overcoming the ethnic and racial and language difficulties to unite together to be effective as a single organization. And that's stuff that our grandparents' generation has passed down to us. Here we are again, right? Because for example, it's no accident that when we went on strike at Hilton, where did the company go to find people to cross the line and work? They went to the most vulnerable and disadvantaged, Micronesians, Marshallese, and so on, were brought in. And of course, they're brought into work. And of course, here they are, they need work. But the company uses them as strike breakers. And so, you know, they consciously do this. And in this case, when the immigration law that's being enforced by law enforcement is being set by a government that's responding to corporate, anybody believe that working people are in control of this country? It's corporations and banks that are setting these laws. And they're being enforced by the police. I don't think it's necessarily the police's fault, but the laws are set. They're being told to enforce them.
Yeah.
You know, so there is certainly an element there. I mean, you have to resist injustice, no matter who's the target, for all the reasons I said.
This is one reason, yeah. I'm sorry, but this is one reason for having like civil disobedience and all that. You know that the law says something, but you're making a point and so forth.
Well, it's the same thing on the drug thing. We won't allow drug testing of our members.
Yeah.
We won't allow it because in practice, they're going to use it to target leaders.
Right.
And in practice, they're going to use it as an excuse to get rid of people they want to get rid of.
Yeah, so that leads me to think, Jeanne, about in terms of outreach, one, but also in terms of connecting with different groups of people, you know, I mean, like the workers, for instance, you know.
And, you know, it's really important because the drug testing issue is huge because there are, for instance, I'll just make it really in particular, medical marijuana patients have been fired, have been suspended because they tested positive on a random drug test. And they were using it for medicinal purposes and not on the job. It didn't impact their work. Some of them had really great reviews up till that point. Then they find themselves fired. And we don't do that for any other medical drugs, but for marijuana we do. And, you know, as Laurie was talking about some of the things that ACLU has done, it's really important to know that even in this arena with medical marijuana, the law enforcement has overreached, has gone on to pick on certain patients, treating them as criminals, just assuming that because they use marijuana, they must be criminals. When in actuality, when somebody registers with the medical marijuana program, it's because they want to be legal. You know, we had a study done, it's less than a 2% chance if you have marijuana, you'll get arrested, 2%. So these people who are providing their names to the registry system want to be legal, and they are. Most of them have no idea where to get marijuana, you know? And law enforcement has overreached, and the ACLU has been there to help patients. And as you know, most patients are either on disability or they're sick, they have a lot of medical bills, they can't afford attorneys. We know of one patient who was, and I'll say this is driving while wearing dreads, was picked up, and he's a legal marijuana patient, and simply because he had marijuana in his truck, he was arrested. Now the law provides that you can do that, but the police refused to see it that way, and he was forced to take a plea deal, so now he has a criminal record.
Wow. Yeah. And you tried to do something about it, but...
well, in this case, because people are sick, you know, it's really difficult for us to say, well, you should appeal it. They don't have money for an attorney. They usually have a public defender who encourages them to take a plea deal.
So one of the things I want to ask, especially for the Drug Policy Forum, how do you support, you know, the effort, because it's like a very important effort, and as we just saw, like with regards to the workers, for instance, or this gentleman here, and so that you can have enough resources that you can like deal with such situations. I know the ACLU helps out, but I mean in terms of like more.
Right, so it's, you know, building coalitions, getting partners, depending on the issue, where we have missions that overlap. We can have different organizations. We have national organizations that we work with.
Some examples of that beyond like the ACLU chapter.
So
the,
like on the mainland, the Drug Policy Alliance would be a big national organization working to end the drug war. Americans for Safe Access, who is really working with medical marijuana patients. Marijuana Policy Project on the mainland. So there are organizations.
These are the kinds of things that in terms of outreach we want to have people know about. And I hope that this program is part of the outreach effort in doing so as well.
We couldn't do it ourselves. You know, we need a group of people, and whether it's individuals who testify, send in testimony, which we were able to do this year. Every year, you know, we're getting more testimony sent in during the legislature, and organizations come on board.
Yeah, and suppose someone wants to find where you are, and so what should they do?
We have a website,
Right.
dpfhi.org, so they can look there. The ACLU has information on drug policies on their website.
Right.
ACLUHawaii.org. We
Yeah.
also have a Facebook page.
Yeah. So the same thing with you folks. What's your
We have
website?
a website. We're at pphi.org. You can also find us on Facebook under Planned Parenthood of Hawaii. We have a Twitter account where we try and put out several messages a day to make sure people know what we're doing. It's pphi at Twitter.
So if somebody like Google's Planned Parenthood Hawaii, they'll find.
We should be the first to come up, I hope.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Same thing with Jeanne. Yeah.
Yep,
Like,
Drug Policy Forum.
Yeah. That's.
You know, that's interesting about it because, you know, we've bargained this. Every year the company comes in and says, we want to do drug testing. And every year we say no, and we end up having these arguments back and forth. But the most insidious piece, I mean, first of all, there's some real crass stuff. It's just plain corporate profiteering. The workers' comp insurance gives you a break on your premiums if you have a drug testing policy, because the drug testing policies all say if you're hurt on the job, you have to take a test, which discourages accident reports and which lowers their cost. So the insurance companies are driving this stuff just to lower their costs and to actually intimidate workers from making reports, you know, of an accident so that they can be covered under the workers' comp statutes, you know, and which is a whole other question. But even more insidious, I think, is the fact that this drug testing policy, specifically as it applies to marijuana, I mean, I think it applies in other ways too, but just speaking to marijuana, it's what you get caught for, because it stays in your body for a long time. And what do when they catch you? They either fire you outright, or they suspend you for a month, and they tell you got to go to treatment and everything else, and then you can come back and you got to be subject to randoms and so on going forward. But you got to think it through. What is the treatment? There's only one treatment for addiction. There's various forms of it, but it comes down to the 12 steps. You know, the addiction treatment, unless you're going to addict them to something else, other drug, comes down to a kind of a spiritual thing. And the addict has to go, in essence, to NA or AA, and they have to stand up in front of the group and say, I'm helpless in the face of my addiction. So you get all these marijuana people in these groups. Stand up and say, I'm helpless in the face of my marijuana addiction. No marijuana smoker believes that they're addicted. They are lying. They're doing it, and not only is it no help to them, but it corrupts the group, because people who really are addicted and who really do need support from their peers are not benefiting by somebody sitting next to them who's there because the court or the company sent them down there, and they got to stand up and say, I'm helpless in the face of my addiction, when they don't believe it.
But they are
You don't even
forced
get to step two.
They're forced to do it, right?
That's-
It undermines the treatment.
It really does. And you know, that's the thing, is that drug testing only tests a point in time. It doesn't indicate whether you've been using it for 2 months, 3 months. It's a point in time test.
It doesn't tell
So
if you're
it doesn't
addicted or
tell
not.
you, doesn't indicate addiction, you know, because, you know, some of us can have a safe glass of wine and we're not, you know, we're
doesn't
not
even indicate
alcoholics. It
impairment.
doesn't,
Yeah,
and it doesn't
that's right.
indicate impairment.
Right.
And so, you know, I always say follow the money. When you look at these drug tests, who makes money from saying we need all these drug testing procedures? Well, the drug testing companies, for one thing, all the laboratories. We have a lot of laboratories. And if you go to some of the employment drug testing labs, there are rows and rows of chairs, and they're busy all the time. They're doing a lot of drug testing.
Whole industry built
And
up on it.
it's a whole industry, and you know, really, random drug testing has been proven not to reduce the use of drugs. It's very, very costly for our society and our businesses, and as you know, the insurance companies require it, but it really doesn't solve the problem, and it adds more problems.
makes it worse.
It makes it worse.
Yeah, I'm thinking now in terms of course, the corporations and all these laboratories, etc., making money out of all this. but there must be something in the way of socialization that all these groups rely on to make it something like natural, that of course we are against drugs is no good, and so forth. Could you speak a little bit to that?
Well,
maybe?
I think that's part of it, you know. Oh, we have a zero tolerance policy. It sounds really great, but really it doesn't solve any problems. I'm reminded of a few years ago, one of the industries went to the legislature to propose that they use a stick that's saliva testing, which is an easier test and cheaper, but it's not FDA approved, it's not as accurate, and oh, they got approval to use them. So why are we not wanting the best testing procedures if we're going to use them? I don't know. We just want to say that we have a drug testing, you know, that it's an indicator that our firm is against drugs, I guess.
And saving 10% on the workers' comp premium.
Yeah.
I mean, right off the bat, whether there's any changes or not.
And yet, you know, there are other drugs that do impair performance.
Absolutely,
They're
yeah, and they are
prescription drugs.
over-the-counter
There are other drugs available, but they don't test for those.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting because those ones, people make money of it, like quote unquote legally, you know, over the counter or whatever.
And you know, ironically, there was just a newspaper article about the so-called synthetic pot, the fake pot products and other. Well, our drug testing policies actually drive people to those more dangerous synthetic drugs because they don't show up in urine tests. And so they're going to take the more dangerous drugs because they don't show up in tests. But the natural product, the marijuana plant, which is less dangerous, shows up. So, you know, there's the irony in our policy.
Well, it also forces marijuana prices so high that hard drugs become economically competitive. You know,
so that's an important point, I think. I'm gonna ask Laurie to say something or a little bit about future programs or future issues that you want to be dealing with, especially with the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, you know, coming to town. When is it? In October or something? November, right? Yeah. So, what are you anticipating? One, and how are you preparing for it? Two, and also, given the experience of the ACLU with the Asia Development Bank before, so did you learn some lessons from that ADB issue here, and how would you want to go about setting up, or you know, you're setting up certain things as of now to deal with that, So just on that.
Well, APEC stands for the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Conference, and it's going to be held in Honolulu in November, and it's going to be bringing in 21 heads of state, including President Obama. So it's a very big deal for Honolulu, and it's important for our city and our state to look really good. And so we're very worried about that and what that means for our individual rights. In the past, our history in Honolulu with the Asian Development Bank conference a few years ago is that the police over-prepare for these events. It's not about preparing for preparing for terrorists. It's about preparing for protesters. And even though Honolulu has not had a big history of getting a lot of crowds for these events, our state and local law enforcement have asked for millions of dollars to provide security. So they are going to be investing millions of dollars in tasers, in facial recognition software, in all sorts of advanced technologies, just to be prepared for what history shows us is maybe a few hundred protesters. And so we're trying to prepare for this sort of overzealous reaction by law enforcement through a few ways. First, we've been just trying to work with law enforcement, and that's been a challenge in itself. This whole process has been very secretive, and well, for good reason. They want to make sure that this is a safe event for everyone involved. And there's some pretty important people that need some good security. So I can understand that. But what we would like to see is more cooperation on the part of the city and the county and state as far as the permitting system. So working on the planning and permitting system for where protests are going to be held, what kind of activities protesters can engage in, and make sure that everyone is able to exercise their First Amendment right to protest in a safe and legal manner. We don't want to see mass arrests that have been following around all these other globalization conferences. We don't want to follow the G20 or the WTOs. Like that's a harsh face to put on Honolulu, is some rioting and law enforcement misconduct. So we've been trying to work with the law enforcement to develop these planning and permitting things, but I've been unfortunately not very successful in that. So we've had to look at some other strategies. And one of the things that we're doing is we're preparing to launch a protest monitor program. And these have been fairly successful on the mainland. ACLU has partnered with the National Lawyers Guild to train people to go to protests and act as a neutral monitor. And what they're not there to protest. What they're there for is to wear something bright that identifies them as a protest monitor, to let law enforcement know that someone's watching, someone's paying attention, someone's taking notes, and to act as sort of a buffer and hopefully neutralize those situations somewhat. On the other hand, they also do something for us in that if we were to file a lawsuit later, that information that they provide about the misconduct can be used as evidence later. So we'll be launching that program fairly soon, this summer, and we'll be looking for people to join us and to volunteer to wear those protest monitor hats and attend the potential protests in November.
Yeah, but that would, the monitors would presuppose that the law enforcement is agreeing with you that there should be monitors and they wouldn't attack him because, I mean, these things happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I can give you examples from around the world about those kinds of things.
Absolutely, yes. Despite the presence, there's still problems.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, are you working, I mean, you mentioned something that working with the law enforcement, but not much progress has been done.
Right.
So has there been some progress done in terms of the monitors, at least, with law enforcement? No?
Well, we're just launching that program now.
Okay.
So we anticipate starting some trainings this summer, and hope to have a good number of people ready to go for November.
But the law enforcement knows that you're going to be doing this. I mean, they're listening now, maybe.
Right.
I don't know, but
well, this is a popular program on the mainland as well. So most protests that you see will have some number of observers that might be wearing like a neon green hat or something that identifies them as
I was
such.
thinking that they might be testing for drugs.
Well, it's strange though, because I'm not sure what benefits the community will accrue from this.
Yeah.
I think they hold these things here because protesters will have to fly in,
Yes.
and therefore it's just harder to mount massive protests. So I guess we're better from the point of view of the conference organizers. But my members are going to have to go through security scans just to get to work, and the guests will as well. And some of the hotels have told me that it's like they don't want. I mean, you're going to stay in our hotel, whoever it is, Indonesia, take the whole hotel.
Yeah.
Because how are you going to mix? How are the guests? What are they going to do? Go through security on their way back to the beach? Are the guests going to be subject to background testing? These facials recognition. What if one of the guests ends up on some FBI profile or something? And what if one of our members? What if the Secret Service or somebody says we don't want that one working? And yet they have a right to work.
That's right.
And so it's unclear to me. I'm not even sure if our people are going to be working. If some country takes a hotel and only fills up half the rooms, then I got half my housekeepers sitting at home.
Right.
There's no room to clean.
Yeah.
Or they're going to have a lot of meals, I suppose, at the convention center. Who's going to eat in a restaurant? So I'm not sure it's going to be an economic benefit for us. It certainly will be a pain in the butt.
If I may interrupt a little bit and then you continue. I know that there's they're studying which country is gonna take which hotel, kind of thing. Yeah, but go ahead. I know that from the UH.
Yeah. I just don't know what's going to happen,
Yeah.
but I'm sure that we'll have many challenges.
Yeah. So because the UH is trying to like quote unquote capitalize on the APEC thing, so that to like show or that we have a lot of people here who are experts in ABC, XYZ, or whatever. So that's good for the university. But what is not happening from the UH, from my point of view, looking at what the UH wants to do, is that everything like is hunky-dory with the APEC, but what is the like drawbacks of APEC, etc., and what kind of thing APEC is doing in terms of economic development, etc., or lack of thereof, for different countries, etc. And are we just celebrating it, or are we trying to, respect the rights of those people who want to protest it? Therefore, the ACLU comes along. And so in some of the discussions we've had in our college, I mean, one of the things I mentioned, plus a couple of other people, that, hey, we got to show APEC. I mean, if you want to like educate students and faculty, etc., about APEC, you got to show all sides of APEC, and not only the positive, etc., but also the other things that are important. And in fact, I was going to ask you about how would the workers, hotel workers, how would they operate given, what's happening? So you mentioned something about that, but more if
it
you
isn't
like.
clear to me yet, but there will be a lot of security at the hotels, for guests and for workers. It's going to be like going through getting on a plane, going through the airport security, some version of that. And we haven't even had any detailed discussions yet, but I don't know. I'm not sure it's going to be an economic benefit for the people working in hotels. They might lose money, because of the nature of this. And I'm not sure it's going to be a good advertisement for Hawaii tourism if you come on vacation and you get frisked going in and out of the lobby or something. I'm hoping they don't get too draconian on this, but like what I'm hearing is these guys are ramping up to do some major stuff, and we didn't see that on the ADB. They didn't have that kind of security in the hotels, but then we didn't have all the heads of state and so on in, and of course that was before 9/11 and so on. So we'll see. I'm worried about it, not because I know what's going to go wrong, but because I really don't know, but something's going to go wrong.
What's it? Sorry.
It's
go
a
ahead.
huge economic benefit for law enforcement.
Yes,
I mean, they'll
absolutely.
be working overtime. They'll have, and look at all the other.
To get all the right equipment and everything else that they want.
The same thing with the drug policy, like all
It's
the tests
exactly,
and,
increasing fear. When you point something out that's dangerous, it's great to have something to blame, so that budgets get inflated, and it's usually, the prison industrial complex, law enforcement, they make out.
Yeah, like I don't know what would happen. Say, for example, if we were on strike.
Right.
What if we are on strike? There's a few hotels that I think it quite well could still be unsettled at that time, and are we going to be told that we're not allowed to strike during this period?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's because of Homeland Security and stuff. Yeah, that's a major problem. I mean, civil rights issue right there. I mean, okay. So we have, I wanted to ask Laurie and Katie something else, but we have a caller on the line, and we'll take that call, and then we can talk about it. All right, caller Jeremiah. Jeremiah, you're on the air.
My question was about the drug testing you guys were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
What do they have to say about all the synthetic urine or the cleansers they have for before people go to take tests? I'm pretty sure it's widely used.
Okay. The synthetic, the synthetic drugs, right? Yeah, maybe Jeanne. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's talking about something to get around the drug testing.
Oh, I
And
see.
certain drug testing companies have procedures to get around that. So, and, you know, the tests are, I think, getting better to detect those kinds of things. So,
Yeah.
You're
Okay,
talking
yeah.
about the cleansers. and
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
It
Yeah.
tends to defeat the test.
right.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask you, Katie, in terms of like Planned Parenthood, do you work also with homeless in terms of that? And you have like outreach to those groups of people, you know? Yeah.
Absolutely. So the majority of the patients that we serve are living below the poverty level. Majority of them are below 150% of the poverty level. So, you know, the people that we care for every day are people who can't afford to go somewhere else for health care. They probably don't have health insurance. And if they do have health insurance, it probably isn't adequate to cover all of their health care needs. So it's kind of our bread and butter. And you know, that's been the really interesting thing this week is people have been talking about, oh, there's a war on women because, you know, the federal government is trying to cut the health care services that Planned Parenthood can provide. And one of the things that's coming down the pipeline is Congress wants to cut any sort of tax incentives for employers that provide health insurance plans that cover things like abortion and other reproductive health care options. But really what it is, I think calling it a war on women glazes over the most important thing. It's a war on poor women.
Yes.
The services that we're talking about, women who have regular incomes, who can purchase their own health insurance or have employers who give really great health insurance plans, they're not the ones we're concerned about. It's the women who don't have anywhere else to go, who can't pay for it.
Yeah, and I would say like not only war on women, but war on children as well,
Absolutely.
because and this is very important, unprotected group of people, which is a significant minority, if we can say so. Yeah. And the other thing is, I know you have a website, etc., but you have more than one. I don't know what clinic.
Yep,
So could you say?
Sure.
Yeah.
We have 3 healthcare centers.
Right.
We have one here in Honolulu that's on South King Street, and that serves the entire island of Oahu. We have a clinic in Kona on the Big Island of Hawaii, and then we have our Maui clinic in Kahului.
Okay.
We're hoping that someday we can open up more basic healthcare centers on neighbor islands, especially on those that don't have a whole lot of service providers.
And like for Oahu, for instance, do you have like mobile units or something? Or you
No,
need
but that's
them-
a great
yeah.
idea.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's good because if you have like more resources and more funding and so forth, whether it's like government funding or private funding, then you know, you could do this kind of outreach and makes it more of a force in the community and really defending women and children. Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's a lot of what we do. And you know, sometimes it seems like we're kind of distant from the, you know, basic civil rights and fundamental rights part of it because we talk a lot about funding and access and, you know, where are there healthcare centers and where aren't there. But that's really what it's about, because you can have the rights, but if you don't have the access, if you don't have somewhere to go to get them, then what good is it going to do you? So, you know, we really are focused on keeping ourselves funded and making sure that we can provide care every day, but also, well, gee, you know, we have more than one island here. How do we make sure that everybody else gets care too? And geographically, sometimes it's hard. If you're on the Big Island of Hawaii right now, you can go to Kona, but if you're in Hilo, that's a really far ride for you.
Yeah.
So that's some of the things
No,
that
no,
we're
yeah,
looking
that's
at.
good. I wanted to ask Jeanne the same question. I mean, when we talk about drugs, etc., especially what you said in the beginning, in terms of the poor and so on. So, do you have outreach to the homeless, for instance,
No,
or
we're more of a policy organization, so we concentrate our efforts on policymakers. One of the things we have in common with Planned Parenthood and Drug Policy Forum, we also advocate for you know, sexual and reproductive education and really good education in our schools for drug prevention education. So, although we don't do it, what we want to do is to get standards there, so that we have good education.
Yeah, good. I just want to make sure like we are clear on these issues, but also on the question of the homeless, like for Laurie, you know, and what the ACLU has been doing. Could you say something about the homeless issue over the past, I don't know, a few years? Or
Sure,
something?
sure.
a few years ago, we did a pretty exciting case on behalf of all the homeless children in Hawaii, and we charged the state with failing to provide them with equal access to education. And we were fortunate to settle that suit and really get some great policy changes so that the way we treat homeless children in our schools doesn't violate the law anymore. For instance, we're not requiring students to have permanent addresses when they register for school. So we're not turning them away at the schoolhouse door before they even have a chance. But besides litigation, we also try to do some other outreach. We're very concerned about what's going to happen around APEC again. The city talks a lot about Honolulu's image and what we're going to do with the homeless people, and so we're afraid about what this means. We've heard rumors about roundups and involuntary commitments, and these are all very scary things to consider. Homeless people are not just of one type. We have families who just can't afford the rent, and we certainly have mentally ill and drug addicted and all kinds of people, working poor. So there's all kinds, and the one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work with homeless people. Through the past few years, we've seen just a barrage of bills coming out of the county councils as well as the legislature, trying to criminalize activities by the homeless, whether this is sitting at a bus stop or sleeping at a bus stop, using a shopping cart to wheel your belongings around, urinating, like all types of things that are just basic life necessities that we can't do without, but we're willing to criminalize people for it for no reason other than we don't like how they look and that they're, we don't want them around. So we've been blamed a lot for being the cause of homelessness, which is really absurd. When we look at a law, it's how is this going to affect everyone? So for a law that would criminalize, sitting at the bus stop or sleeping at the bus stop, well, that applies to your baby in the stroller as well as your auntie taking a nap, just as much as it applies to any homeless person that's laying on the bench. So when we're considering these issues that are targeting the homeless, it's really important for us to talk about these laws, how they affect us all, because it's not just a one-size-fits-all approach.
And one of the things that's important about these laws is they don't look for solutions. These are all criminalizing activities. One of the things we'd like to see happen is the Housing First program for the homeless who have addictions. And what this model says is we provide housing. Currently, a lot of people who are addicted to drugs do not qualify for shelters, do not qualify for certain. So what we say is, okay, first we provide you with shelter so that you're able then to be stable, and then we can work on the addiction and get you into treatment. That model works in the mainland. Yeah,
we have a few seconds left in the program. Time passes by quickly. So anything you folks, any of you, like looking at in terms of, say, the legislature, anything that you're tracking, you want to see like pass this thing beyond what you just mentioned on the program? We have a few.
I have a couple. There's two employment discrimination bills, which I think we can all rally around. One would prohibit discrimination on the basis of gender identity, and the other would prohibit discrimination on the basis of domestic violence status in employment.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for coming and sharing your views with us. And thanks to our viewers, and see you next month. Aloha.